Welcome to the Leadership Gambit podcast, where we share life lessons to guide you through your journey to survive and thrive in a volatile business world. And now, Chris Miller.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 4. Last season, we spent a lot of time talking about office politics because it's something that I'm asked about all the time from different people. How do I do this? How do I navigate this? Now, we ended last season talking about toxic politics and toxic environments. And there was a reason for that. And that was because it's a conversation that I've been having with a lot of people lately who are not happy with where they are at their career. They're not happy with where they are at their office. They don't like the company they work for. There's a number of different things. I know the feeling because I've been there. I know a lot of people that are frustrated out there with where they are and the company that they work for. But a lot of them also don't know where to go from here. This is all maybe you went to school for one thing. Now you're doing that thing and you're actually in it day to day and you're going, I don't know if I like this actually anymore. Seeing people not very happy, not content, not very engaged with where they are and just kind of floundering about not knowing what to do next. Today's episode is for all of you. Now, I've been through this exact type of situation myself, and I've been through it more than once, but I'll take you back to where I originally started this. I basically went and I did a whole bunch of research, and I developed a model for myself that helped me figure out what my path was. Since then, I've now taken other people that I've managed over the years and that I've coached over the years through this same process, and it's helped them as well to find clarity, to find their path, and to actually move forward and advance and develop themselves. I will say that this model is a little bit of a hodgepodge of different things that I've read through different books and, different questions that had a big impact on me as I went through trying to find myself as well. So what I've done is taken the best of all this stuff. And that's what I'm about to take you through now. And before we jump in, it's important to note that while everyone's path is obviously different and your development plan is going to be unique to you, the process that I'm going to take you through, it's really about helping you think differently. Okay. And what I have seen is that by helping people think differently, they then acted differently coming out of thinking differently. I've seen some people use this to define new careers for themselves or define new goals. I've seen some people use it to switch industries. I've seen some people use it to retire and kind of go independent. Regardless of the outcome, the majority of people end this process with a new vision or sense of self and some sort of foundation for a development plan. Now let's jump into how this process works, the conversations that drive it, and help you find yourself or your next step. I want to start this by acting as if I have just started. I'm your new manager. We've only met a couple of times, and we're having our first real one-on-one now today. Now, I'm going to start by asking you the same question that I ask everyone that I manage. Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? I know that there was just a bit of a dead air, but that was intentional. I wanted you to think about the question. The reason I wanted you to think about the question is because most people, I would say a good 90% of people, when I ask the question, I get a blank stare or I get a kind of embarrassed or timid, I don't know, no one's ever asked me that before type of response. Personally, I've always thought that type of response was actually a scathing indictment of the industry and a reflection on a lack of the leaders and terrible management out there. But it is what it is. That is where most people are at. And I'm sure that many of you listening out there right now are thinking the same thing. Like, nobody's ever asked me that either. So now this is why you need to ask yourself that, or allow me to ask that to you. Either way, now is the time to start thinking that through. Now, I find that I have seen a lot of people, when I say, let's start thinking that through, that become paralyzed and they get anxious at the idea that they don't actually have an answer and know what they want to do. And I'll be honest, I'm not totally sure why that type of response comes back. This should not be an anxiety inducing exercise by any means. This should actually be a process of self discovery and understanding yourself better. There shouldn't be anything stressful about this. This should be fun. If you do find it stressful, that tells me that you're actually probably going off into a million different what ifs in your head, or different scenarios, or thinking about all the unknowns that you don't know, and that's driving you into a sympathetic nervous system mindset, which is your fight or flight response. If you go back and listen to our episode season 1 on how to better control your brain, we actually talk about different ways that you can deactivate your sympathetic nervous system and activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that you're going to want active while you're thinking about the future. One cool thing that has been proven in studies is that if you think about the future, if you and I sat down and we talked about your future for the next 20 to 30 minutes, it would actually enable your parasympathetic nervous system by the time we were done having the conversation, because we would be sitting there thinking more creatively, right? If you find yourself becoming or feeling overwhelmed, please go back to our episode on how to better control your brain. And please listen to some of the tactics that we recommend on how to deactivate your fight or flight response and activate your rest and digest response. I have to fully admit that I have learned over the years that asking the 5 to 10 year question and then leaving people to go figure it out for themselves, it doesn't really work very well for most people. The most common response I actually hear when I regroup, so let's say I ask you to take that away in our one-on-one. I said, take the next week, think about where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. And next week when we meet again, come back and let's see where you're at. The majority of people that next week, when they come back and I ask the question, that they say, I don't know where to start. I get very overwhelmed just thinking about it. Now, look, I get it. When you haven't thought big picture like that before, when you haven't thought in those terms before, when you haven't been encouraged to be in that kind of mindset before, it's not an easy thing to do. So where do you even start? Let's go back to where I started. So this whole thing came about right after I had literally burned out and resigned from my job, but working as a management consultant. And in this job, I had been working for nearly 5 years at a minimum of 70 hours a week. And in some weeks, it was 80, 90, 100. So I just burned out. And trust me when I say the money might be good, but it's not worth your mental health. I woke up the morning after leaving consulting and I had nothing but time and more than enough money to last me a couple of years without working easily based on my current living expenses. Now, after spending about a month pretty much doing nothing, I started asking myself what my next move was. And I had no idea. It was a big cloudy question mark to me. I liked the work that I'd done previously, but not all of it. I did not want to go back to working 70, 80, 100 hours a week. That was off the table. So I started doing some research into this idea of finding my purpose or my why. And I stumbled across this Japanese model called the Ikigai model. And I decided to use it as a blueprint for myself. The Ikigai model is a Japanese concept that acts as a self-reflection framework that helps you discover your purpose in life. The word Ikigai roughly translates to reason for being, or the thing that gets you up in the morning. The model is built around the intersection of 4 fundamental questions. What do you love? And that speaks to your passions and your interests, and the activities that bring you joy or energize you. So that's what do you love? Next, what are you good at? These are your talents, your strengths, your skills. What do you actually excel at? Or what have you developed through experience? So what are you good at? What does the world need? This considers the impact that you can have, identifying how your contributions can serve others or fulfill a greater purpose. And what can you be paid for? That tries to ground the model in reality, ensuring your purpose is sustainable through income or some sort of compensation. So, what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? What can you get paid for? When circles overlap, they provide deeper insight into yourself. So, think of drawing 4 circles, and each one of those circles has one of those 4 questions in it. So, obviously, each question is going to overlap with 2 other questions based on those circles. Okay. When the intersection of what you love and what you're good at collide, that's your passion. The intersection of what you love and what the world needs reveals your mission. What the world needs and what you can get paid for points to your vocation. And what you're good at plus what you can get paid for, that forms your profession. Now, when all 4 dimensions overlap, you have found your reason, your purpose, your why, whatever you want to call it. This isn't a one-off exercise either, because all 4 of these variables will change over the course of your life. So I highly recommend grab a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, go through the exercise yourself. Learn about yourself. It's always good to learn about yourself. And as I went through the exercise, I realized that leadership and management were my passion. It felt good bringing people together and achieving something big. So I knew I wanted to be a leader, and I knew it would require a lot more experience and self-development if I wanted to continue to manage big things. Assuming you now know, or at least have a loose idea of what drives you or what you would like to do, your reason for getting up in the morning, the next thing you need to do is to determine what type of employment is best suited to your goals or your personality type. That's what I did next. And what I'm going to go through with you now is a summary of my research to help you in your quest. The 3 main types of employment I'm referring to are entrepreneurship, freelancing, and full employment. I've rated each of them on a handful of dimensions, including compensation, flexibility, volatility, development, potential, and then some general pros and cons. Let's start with entrepreneurship. Compensation starts at none to little as an entrepreneur. Typically, you're not going to have a customer day one. Flexibility is low to start as well, because building a business takes a lot of commitment and time. Volatility on this is also high, because 1 in 5 businesses fail every year. Development is 100% self-directed and self-funded. I think this path is best suited for those of you who want to create a startup to try to build your own thing into a small, mid, or even large-sized business. Pros would be that your potential earnings and flexibility could be as big as the company that you choose to build. There is usually a lot of opportunity for development because in startups, most people have to wear multiple hats as well. So you're going to have to learn a lot of things about a lot of things. As an example, starting your own business, you're likely going to have to be your own accountant for a while. Another nice thing, you don't really have a boss. Well, that's not entirely true because building your own startup does require capital typically. And as soon as you bring on investors on board, you now have a boss. Now, the biggest cons are that you risk losing everything if the company fails. And the further out you look, the higher the rate of company failures. So what I mean by that is that at 5 years, there's only a 50-50 chance your company will have survived. Also, you have no paid vacation or benefits unless your company pays for them. And if the company is not making any money, the only option at that point is to put yourself into debt if you're going to try to fund those things. I will say this is the least common type of path I've seen people take, and I believe it takes a very specific type of person to build their own successful business from a startup. When I looked at that for myself in the whole context of, being a leader and a manager, or maybe even a leader and management consultant, I was still in my 30s at the time, and I didn't think people in their 40s to 60s that would be hiring those type of consultants would be bringing in a 30-something to care what they had to say. So this one didn't fit my goals personally. So the next type of employment is freelancing. You may also hear this called contracting or being an independent contractor. Compensation is usually average to well above average, depending on the type of role and the specialization that you may be bringing. Flexibility is high as you can pick and choose your contracts. I know freelancers who choose to work 5 days a week, and I know others who choose to work 3. It's something that you can negotiate with clients on as a freelancer. And by the way, the ones only working 3 days a week are still making well over 6-figure salaries. Volatility, that really depends on the industry and the companies that you work with. For example, if you're contracted purely by project, it's going to be a lot more volatile than if you're contracted for some sort of steady state work. I will say volatility tends to be higher as a freelancer than as an employee, because if there is a downturn or a budgetary problem, usually you're going to be one of the first ones cut. Development is 100% self-directed and self-funded. And as a freelancer, I would argue it's almost a prerequisite. If I'm going to hire you or someone's going to hire you to do a specialized task for them, like system administration or something, specific to some sort of system or tool, you're going to be expected to have any relevant certifications and be up to date on those things coming into that environment. So freelancing, I would say it's better suited for people who want more flexibility, but that are okay with some uncertainty. And you're also going to have to be someone who's much better at self-managing, because things like your taxes, they don't pay your taxes as a freelancer. You have to pay your own taxes on your income. So you got to save a portion of it regardless every week or 2 weeks or whenever you submit your invoice. That's for the other cons. You don't get paid on a regular cadence necessarily. If you're a contractor, freelancer, you may only get paid once a month after you submit your invoice. And it could be 30 to 45 days after submitting your invoice before you see the pay. Now, the biggest pro to freelancing is you can make a lot more money as an employee. I know lots of people making $250,000 plus as freelancers, and some aren't even working full-time hours. You have a lot of flexibility here. Biggest cons to freelancing are you get no benefits or paid time off. If you signed a fixed fee contract and you end up needing to do a lot more hours than were originally contracted, unless you get a change order, you are doing those hours free to finish it. Or if you poorly estimate it, you're doing free hours. Freelancing can also include hub work, which includes things like driving for Uber, delivering for DoorDash. This probably provides the most flexibility because even freelance full-time contracts can require you to be available from regular business hours, kind of Monday to Friday. But hub work, you can really pick and choose what hours of the day and times of the day you want to work. Now, the trade-off on this to be aware of is hub jobs like that typically don't pay well, and statistically, few people do better than minimum wage after their personal expenses are paid. Now, when I looked at the idea of freelancing, this is what I had been doing for the previous 5 years leading up to burning out. And I knew that if I went back to it, I could make good money again, but I would be doing the same thing over and over and over. And it wouldn't be putting me on the path to leading bigger and better things. Leading bigger things wouldn't come naturally from that path. So this one didn't make any sense to me either. So that brings us to full employment. Now, with full employment, compensation is going to be average typically, and it's going to be tied into the company's banding or the standard role range policies. Maybe they look at the market reports every year and they base their role compensation negotiations on that. But it's going to be a lot more restrictive. Your flexibility here is going to be a lot lower than as a freelancer or contractor as well. And your employment contract will typically set the business hours you're expected to work as an employee. And full-time employees are also the ones that have most been forced back to the office with these return to office mandates as well. So your flexibility as an employee is going to be lower. Here's the trade-off. the volatility is going to be the lowest of all of these options. Now, even in the day of mass layoffs, it's still a lot harder and cost the company more to get rid of an actual full employee than a contractor or a freelancer. Now, development is a complete crapshoot when it comes to companies, and some will actually provide you with development opportunities or money. Some will pay you back if you go do it on your own. Some will offer you nothing. Some will take the budget away at the first chance. I've seen all of that. This type of role, full employment, is probably best for people who need the stability or the consistency and don't mind that lack of flexibility. So stability is probably the biggest pro for full employment. But the other pros, and there are many for this one, include health benefits, sometimes investment matching, paid days off, paid sick days, bonuses, incentives for some roles, among other things. Now, the biggest con, other than flexibility to being salaried, is that you will end up giving the company unpaid overtime in most jobs. Even if you have a bonus, I guarantee if you total up the number of hours you did and divide your bonus by that number, many of you are going to be into the dollars or cents per hour for what you actually got from that bonus. And I've calculated my own bonus some years, and it literally worked out to pennies on the hour. Clearly, looking at it that way makes it not worth it. And I will say this is a pro tip and a side note for everybody out there listening. If you are doing a lot of hours for your company and you don't have a bonus or you're not getting anything out of it, and even if you are and you're only making, dollars per hour, if that, stop doing it. This is the same thing I tell everybody at Coach, even the people that report to me. I don't want you working all those extra hours for free. And you're much better spent taking that time, focusing on self-development and developing yourself and your own skills. That's going to have such a bigger ROI or return on investment than giving the company a bunch more free time. I promise you. So please, if you're doing a lot of free overtime, go start investing that time in yourself. Remember, when it comes to development, like I said, it's going to be very hit and miss. Don't let the company be your excuse to not focus on self-development. And also remember, the bigger the company, the more you're going to need to do to stand out and try to get ahead. Now, as I weighed my options, and I knew my focus was on getting broader experience and more development, I actually decided to step away from freelancing and go back to full-time employee. Trade-off being, I knew I was going to make less than half of what I'd been making previously freelancing. But as the expression goes, sometimes you have to give up to move up. And there is truth in that. So this one was what made the most sense to me at the time. So I choose to go back to full-time employee. So at this point, I knew I wanted to be a leader and manager. I knew I wanted to go back to being an employee because it was the best opportunity for my development and growth. Now I need to figure out what I wanted to lead and what area of the business I was best suited for. This led me to my next question, and this is the next question that you need to also ask yourself to define your path. And this is a discussion I've had with a lot of people over the years. Do you want to be a generalist or a specialist? This is actually a question you need to figure out for yourself regardless of the employment types we talked about, because it's going to determine the type of business you build, the type of services you offer as a freelancer, or the type of role that you're going to pursue as a full-time employee. Now let's talk about both so you can decide for yourself. I'm going to start with generalist because that's what I am. Generalists know a little about a lot. This is more of a jack of all trades type skill set. Now your level of depth is going to vary, depending on the types of topics and the scope of your coverage. You might be able to go really deep on some things, but, very shallow on other things. That's what being a generalist means. The downside is obviously you're not going to be a deep subject matter expert. But the positive side, generalists typically are able to see the big picture a lot more clearly and typically are able to move into strategist type roles. As a result of being a generalist and being able to see that big picture, you're also more likely to be elevated into senior management roles or director, VP roles, like, the director, VP of operations. Generalists also tend to be a lot more flexible and adaptable when it comes to changing circumstances or restructures or, market disruptions. On the other hand, a lot of people and institutions push people to be specialists. That's especially true in higher education. Being a specialist can make you very successful in that particular area, like marketing specialist or a sales specialist. You can also get paid a lot as a subject matter expert in that area. For example, platform system architects, they tend to make hundreds of dollars an hour when they're at the top of their game. That limitation is that once you're at that top, there's really nowhere else to go unless you start expanding into adjacencies and start broadening your scope. So at some point as a specialist, you will hit a certain point where you're going to get stuck. But you know what? Maybe that's all you want, though, and that's a perfectly good goal to have, too. My only caution would be, especially in tech, but in all jobs, really, ask yourself, will that particular job always be needed once a year at minimum? Lots of jobs over the decades have been retired while new ones have been created. New industries in tech leave some jobs behind while new ones are created. I want to make it clear, too, that I'm not saying specialists can't rise to C-suite roles, because you absolutely can, but there's going to be a lot less of those narrowly focused roles at the top naturally. And one additional benefit to specialists is if you have an in-demand skill, you can charge a pretty penny freelancing. I've seen guys billing out at $300, $400, even $1,000 an hour who are very specialized. But I want to make sure that I'm keeping your expectations in check. The people making that kind of money typically went to Ivy League schools or had 20 plus years experiences in their industry. So what did all this analysis do for me? Well, it helped me figure out I wanted to work my way up to an executive leader where I could have the biggest positive impact on the company. It helped me figure out that I was best suited for a services or operational leadership type role. And going back to full-time employee was the best way to make that happen. That realization and some planning helped me to achieve my manager, director, and VP titles, and all before the age range that I had targeted for myself. As a generalist, I've now been able to lead teams across marketing, sales operations, professional services, products, support, renewals, customer experience, center of excellence, and others. It's given me the ability to see the perspective all the way from the top of the company to the bottom and find connective tissue across it. In fact, I had an executive coach for a while, and he said to me one day, I feel like every time we have one of these sessions, I walk away having learned more from you than you did from me. You seem to see the big picture in a way that most executives I've coached don't. Now, I don't say that to be boastful. I'm actually saying that because that validation from him was kind of the inflection point at which that I understood that the culmination of the decisions that I'd made and the analysis that I had done in this initial analysis, determining that I wanted to be a leader as an employee in a service or operations role as a generalist, those choices are what led me to achieve everything that I have up to this point. And I know it can do the same for you. So I want to close this out by summarizing the questions that I'd like you all to be asking yourselves. So grab a piece of paper or pen if you haven't, and I'd like you to write these down and then write down your honest answers after and when you've thought about them. And this isn't to share with anyone. It's only for you to figure these things out for you. Let's start with the Ikigai model. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And can you get paid for it? Next, what type of employment best suits your goals? Do you need the stability of a full-time employment? Do you prefer the flexibility of being a freelancer? Or do you want to start your own business and become an entrepreneur? And then, do you want to be a generalist who knows a little bit about a lot? Big picture? Or do you want to be a specialist who knows a lot about a much more narrow area? Once you know the answer to these questions, you're going to be well on your way to figuring out your path. Will you have total clarity at this point? Probably not. But I do hope that you find this at least a great starting point to start having that kind of conversation with yourself. And remember, like I said, this is about your mindset. Keep in mind, too, as your new manager, this would have been one of a multi-part discussion that you and I would be having throughout our one-on-one coaching sessions. So this is just the starting point. This just would have been our one session today. Once you start to figure that path out, it's going to take time, but then there's a whole nother set of steps that you got to take to then move on to and go down the path. But that's going to be a discussion for another episode. So thank you everyone for your time today. I hope this really helps you. To all those people out there in my life that I know that are kind of struggling and don't know what to do, I hope that this gives you a good starting point. And look out for part 2, where we're going to talk about what to do once you have figured out exactly what you want to do and what your path is. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
This has been the Leadership Gambit podcast with your host and management expert, Chris Miller. If you like our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment or review, make a donation, and most importantly, share us with others in your network. Visit us at www.theleadershipmovement.net for more content and helpful business resources.